So another live-action Avatar remake came out, and it's kind of exactly as good as I expected it to be, which is to say, it's really bad. It's not as bad as the movie, but that is a low bar, and honestly, I think it is still close. The writing is bad, the acting is bad, they don't do a good job of respecting the source material, and even the directing and editing are bad. You kind of see all of the bad things pretty much immediately. In basically the first 30 seconds, already 2 different shots are reused within a few seconds of one another. And we get a couple of weird continuity errors almost right away. Already a really bad start for the show. But that is then followed up by a bunch of moments with the characters doing things that defy all logic and reasoning. This earthbending spy is trying to escape with Fire Nation battle plans. He's running away from Fire Nation guards to meet up with his friend and escape. Except the meeting point is just at a random spot in the middle of the city, and the plan is apparently to escape by riding chocobos through more narrow city streets. But then the Fire Nation guards catch up to the spy, and instead of trying to fend them off and get away, or create a wall between them and himself so he can escape, he creates a wall between himself and his friend so his friend can get away without him. Putting aside the fact that this is a very stupid trope, it doesn't make sense to make his friend escape without him, because suppose he does get away from the 6 guards chasing them, I assume the city has more than 6 guards, and they're probably better off trying to fight them together instead of separately, or splitting up when they're actually close to the exit from the city. I know this sounds kind of nitpicky, but if the entire foundation of the first 2 minutes of the show and the justification for literally everything that's happening is already completely invalid, it doesn't bode well for anything that happens as a result of this scene. This becomes even more concerning when you think about the fact that the scene was written by the people who wrote the rest of the show, meaning that whatever thought process went into making this scene will likely be used for most of the rest of the show. We are about 2 minutes in, and already everything looks like a complete disaster. Anyway, the spy gets caught, and for whatever reason, instead of being thrown in jail, is brought to the Fire Lord. The spy tells the Fire Lord that he's too late, that the plans have been stolen, and there's nothing the Fire Lord can do, which, for what it's worth, is not true. Plans can change. But the Fire Lord says actually it's a good thing, because that means everyone will be distracted by that plan while they can actually do other things. And the spy responds by saying, "But we'll be prepared for your attack." And then the Fire Lord repeats, again, that everyone will be distracted by this plan, which means that the other nations will be vulnerable. And then finally, the spy puts it together and says, "Wait, you wanted us to know. We aren't the real target." Then the Fire Lord sets the spy on fire and burns him alive. This is the funniest scene of the entire episode. This spy is clearly an idiot. The Fire Lord has no real motivations for explaining to the spy what's going on and maybe going senile. And then a man gets set on fire and we learn that the Fire Nation wants to commit genocide. And it's all played completely straight. It's absolutely insane. After this, it cuts to the opening. And for some reason, instead of using what was one of the most tightly written and best openers of any show in the history of television, the remake rewrites it to exclusively feature incredibly clunky exposition, followed by the narrator repeating the Fire Lord's plan for the 3rd time in 30 seconds, and announcing that Aang is the Avatar. Right after this, we meet Aang, who immediately reminds the audience why child actors shouldn't be made leads, followed by almost 10 full minutes of straight exposition. Nobody does literally anything. It's just people standing around talking for 10 full minutes. It's boring as shit and completely unengaging. Also, Monkey Otso heavily foreshadows that he's gonna die by telling Aang he may miss his teachers one day, which, very subtle. During this 10-minute exposition dump, the show continues its parade of insane logic with the monks insisting that Aang, a 12-year-old, needs to leave the air temple by himself to go learn the other elements immediately, right as a war is about to start. At this point, why not? No one else is thinking logically. Might as well do something stupid and risk the Avatar's life. But before he actually leaves, Aang can't sleep and decides he needs to fly around a bit to clear his head. So he leaves, but not to go training. We'll get back to Aang in a second, because literally right after he leaves, the Fire Nation shows up and attacks the air temple. Something I didn't mention before is that the air nomads, apparently, have a festival to celebrate the coming of a firebending comet, and they conveniently celebrate by all meeting up at one location. So literally all of the air nomads are in the same place at the same time for the Fire Nation to wipe out. And this next scene is where the show 100% completely lost me. The Fire Nation soldiers attack the air temple, but it turns out that these pacifist, nomad monks are actually all highly trained fighters, and even though there's a comet that makes firebenders more powerful, it takes 3 Fire Nation soldiers to take out 1 nameless monk. But it gets even more insane when we see all of the monks fight off the Fire Nation soldiers with wooden poles. So, small tangent, they're obviously using the poles as their weapons because Aang used a wooden staff in the original show, but it's important to note that the whole point of him using his staff was that it wasn't a good weapon. Aang is a pacifist, he doesn't want to hurt people, and he refuses to carry any real weapons on him. He uses his staff specifically because it means he isn't capable of badly hurting anyone. The most he can do is vaguely incapacitate them or just irritate them enough to leave them alone. That is an extremely important piece of characterization that is completely lost on the writers of this remake, and it makes even less sense for this to be the case since the monks are all master martial artists. But that's not even the worst part about the poles, because the monks are using these wooden poles to fend off soldiers who use metal swords. Except that's not even the worst part about all of this, because the monks are using wooden poles to fight firebenders. They are literally fighting fire with wooden sticks, by choice. This is so fucking stupid. While all of this happens, Aang decides to fly out to the middle of the ocean in the middle of a storm for no apparent reason. At some point after he's flown really far into the ocean, he realizes it's probably a bad idea to be flying around the ocean in the middle of a storm, and then promptly drowns and does the whole Avatar state thing. In a vacuum, the way Aang ends up freezing in an iceberg is just stupid. A 12-year-old wants to go clear his head, ignores how obviously idiotic it is to fly around the middle of the ocean in a storm, and drowns as a result. It feels like a scene from a dark comedy sketch show, not a serious climactic moment that sets up all of the events of the rest of the show. But this is also the only part of the remake so far that also occurs beat for beat in the original show, and comparing it to the original show just shows how catastrophically badly the remake fucked this up. First of all, in the original, there's very little exposition. We actually see Aang goofing around in the air temple and also see how him being so powerful is actually a problem because other kids refuse to play with him because they feel like it's unfair. Aang doesn't need to tell the audience he's frustrated about being special, we actually see him get frustrated and upset about the fact that other kids treat him differently for his powers. This is also crucial setup for Aang's reaction to finding out he's the Avatar. He's angry that he's being treated like an adult while still being a child. And, fittingly, his reaction is also very childish. He stubbornly tries to fly through a storm despite knowing it's a bad idea because he's more angry about being the Avatar at home than he is scared about drowning in the storm. But in the end, stubbornness can't beat out nature, and he inevitably drowns only for his Avatar abilities to kind of bail him out. But that's just the surface layer of this scene. The storm isn't just an obstacle here, it's also meant to represent Aang's inner turmoil, how he's furious about being named the Avatar and how he feels betrayed by Monkey Yatsu for pushing him into that role despite being his friend. But also how he feels incredibly guilty about abandoning his responsibilities and how ashamed he is to not be able to take them on. Aang is dealing with an actual literal storm while also having to deal with a sort of inner storm of emotions. The Avatar state is also used to represent Aang's responsibilities, and this whole situation demonstrates how no matter what he does, he can't escape them. In a twisted way, dying would have relieved Aang of his Avatar duties, but even then, the Avatar state prevented him from dying, and when he freezes, even though he is able to procrastinate his responsibilities for literally 100 years, he eventually wakes up and is forced to take them back on. This whole scene is about more than just Aang being upset about being the Avatar and getting lost in a storm. It's an analogy for how childish it is to run away from your fears and expect them to disappear, how pointless it is, and how inevitable it is that your demons will come back and demand to be dealt with whether you like it or not. Those themes are also some of the core themes of the entire show. Every character is confronted with their deepest fears and insecurities, runs away from them, and is forced to face them in the end anyway. In doing so, they become stronger versions of themselves. That central theme is the heart of the show. It's what made it so good and why it resonated with so many people. And it all starts with this foundational scene of Aang running away from home. The fact that the remake ignores all of those themes and boils down Aang's entire emotional journey to him just kind of wanting to clear his head and drowning because he's an idiot 12-year-old tells me everything I need to know about this show. This is nothing but a cynical cash grab made by people who see Avatar as just another marketable brand, who view this show as just a fantasy show set in an Asian-inspired world, and who think that exoticism is the entire reason the show is successful. And that's before we even get to the nonsense logic and awful writing. I'm sure this show is going to have plenty more insane logic to rip into, that I could make a video as long as the total runtime of this remake taking apart every single thing this show does wrong. But I'm just not going to bother. I have better things to do with my time, and honestly, so do you. I would strongly encourage you not to watch this remake, even if you're curious. Netflix doesn't care if you like the show, they only care if you watch it, and they shouldn't be encouraged to pull more bullshit like this.